Good morning or good afternoon. Hey guys, and welcome to our final unit, which is just going to be a review of all the awesome things that we have learned so far this year. This is when we go back and make sure that it's stuck in our head so we can forget it over the summer and come back next year and be like, wait, what? Yes, I remember those days back when I was homeschooled. I still had summers, and we would come back and it would be like, all right, I'm ready to rock and roll. Wait, what is this? And it would be like, Algebra 2, using what you learned last year in Algebra 1. And I was like, wait, what algebra? Wait, no. That's some kind of mistake because you see, I have never taken Algebra 1. I don't care what this textbook or this notebook says. No, that's not my handwriting. It must be a forgery. A forgery, I say. Anyway. Yeah, so we're going to go over all that stuff, and it's going to be great. So we're going to start with good old molecular biology, because macromolecules are basically the heart of biology. And I hate to say that because you're like, that's chemistry, Mr. Garner, and you're right. It's biochemistry. But you know, it really is super important to understand how these guys function. So let's go ahead, bite the bullet, and dive right in. We're going to talk about all of this cool stuff, so if you want to pause the video and take notes, you certainly can, but if not, let's keep going. Molecular biology is going to look at all the stuff that's happening under the hood. Basically, it's all the stuff that you can't see going on, but that makes all the stuff that you can see go on. So, it's important stuff. As you can see here, this is just a very quick overview of metabolism that I'm not going to go into because it's just here as an example, but this is one of the many examples of the very complex systems that have to happen so that when you eat ice cream or burgers or chips or fries or, oh my god, wait, vegetarian, wait, what am I saying? Spinach and beans and stuff like, that you can get energy from it. So we're going to look at all the different reactions and chemicals and stuff like that. Not specifically this one. This is metabolism, but we're going to look at all this stuff as an overview and see, all right, how is it that a bunch of chemicals make you and me able to enjoy a good old veggie burger? All right, metabolism. So when we talk about these wonderful cellular processes, really chemical processes, we're talking about metabolism. Now, usually we say cell respiration is the same thing as metabolism, and that's the way that I taught it because I think that makes a lot of sense and it helps to clear up some confusion sometimes later. But metabolism, officially defined by this course, is both respiration and photosynthesis. It's really just any chemical reactions that occur in a cell or an organism. Okay, so if you were to, even in this case, talk about the chemical reactions that occur in your brain to release neurotransmitters and to get you to, react in a certain way, that would still be considered metabolism officially by this definition. So we're going to talk generally about metabolism, but it might not have to do necessarily with us eating food. All reactions in your body are controlled by these wonderful things called enzymes. And enzymes are a type of protein. You can think of the enzymes as being the heavy lifters, the chemical workers, the people that go out there and do the job. They get the stuff done. And they are controlled and regulated, like minions, by an evil Groot that sits in the middle of the cell. No, it's not Groot. It is called the nucleus. And Gru, sorry. I'm mixing up my fandoms here. So proteins or enzymes are all the workers in your cell, and they're controlled by the nucleus, right? So they're like the minions. The nucleus is like Gru. If you get that reference, hopefully you do. Okay, so metabolic reactions, what do? One, they provide you energy, so when you eat food and all that stuff, and energy is really important because we need that in order to do all the stuff that we do as living organisms. And it allows us to be able to take in outside stuff to make it a part of our bodies. I know we had that giant philosophical discussion about what are you, what am I defined by you, what is life? And that philosophical discussion really, I think I brought this up then, but it really takes into account the biological fact that, guys, the body that you're currently walking around in is not the same one you were walking around in when you were a kiddo. All right? Your cells and everything that all of the atoms that make you up have been cycled through. Okay, you've gathered new atoms from the environment, from your food, in interaction with just stuff around you, and they've replaced all of the atoms that used to be a part of your body. So your body is a completely different body, but it's like you never left it though, right? So it's like the organization stayed the same, it all seemed to be the same, and it all seems to be the same now. I mean, you look down at your body and say, no, it's the same old body I've had, since I was born. But no, it looks the same. It's the same organization, but it's completely different. We are constantly cycling through the environment, and it's weird to think about because it kind of breaks down the barriers between you and the world around you. But if you think about it, the world around you is constantly remaking you. All the stuff that you take into your body, that you consume, or that you rub into your skin, or that you do whatever else with in relation to your body, all of those substances are basically being taken in, broken down, and they are the components that rebuild you. So you are a walking amalgamation of atoms and parts that you are picking up constantly from the environment to rebuild you at every moment. So metabolic reactions allow this to happen, and that's really important because if we weren't able to assimilate new materials into our body or synthesize them so that we could continue to maintain ourselves, then we would fall apart. Okay, life is a constant series of resisting chaos and destruction, and to do that we have to constantly be rebuilding ourselves. Okay, so metabolism follows two main reactions: anabolic, which means building up a larger molecule out of smaller molecules, or catabolic, which means the opposite, breaking down larger molecules into smaller molecules. Pathways. Okay, pathways is an essential key word here, okay? And I want to kind of go back just for a brief second to this picture right here, okay? This is the process, in a very simplified version, by the way, of cell respiration, which takes a sugar, breaks it down into components that can be built back up to power the production of what we call ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is just basically your body's energy source that it uses to power all of its reactions. Okay, so literally we're just breaking down sugar into energy. Look at all the steps. Okay, it is not just the word sugar, an arrow, and the word energy. Okay, why is that? Why does it always have to be this giant complex pathway? Why can't it just be that we take in sugar, we break it down, and we get energy? The reason is it takes so much energy to perform this metabolic process, okay? It takes so much energy to take sugar and convert it into ATP that if we were to do it in one step, the release of energy, or the amount of energy it would take, one, would probably be enough to kill us just because it would completely drain us. But two, if it did go off, and it did actually happen, the resulting release of energy in this reaction would cause you to spontaneously combust and explode from the inside. Okay, guys, these reactions can require an incredible amount of energy, and so we need a pathway to slowly split up the process using just a bit of energy and releasing just a bit of energy step by step, so that when we get to the end, we are not like a giant internal combustion engine ready to go. Okay, so key points here. Metabolism is all the chemical reactions in your body. It provides energy and enables you to constantly maintain your body and keep it going up. It happens through two types of reactions. You build stuff up and you break stuff down. That is as simple as it is. Anabolic reactions. We build up complex molecules from simple ones. Okay, so when we talk about an organic being such as ourselves, we are made out of 4 different classes of molecules known as macromolecules. Okay, essentially these are the molecular compositions or formations that all living things are able to use and that build up all the processes of life. Okay. So it's our basic building blocks. And we build those from what we call a monomer. Okay, I'll go into this term a little bit later in more detail, but a monomer is essentially like a small Lego piece that fits together with other small Lego pieces to make a big, complex Lego structure. Okay, a monomer is just a single molecule that has the potential to be put together with another one to make a macromolecule, which is the type of molecule that makes you and me. Okay, so the synthesis of a macromolecule, or a big Lego structure, from the small monomer Lego pieces is called a condensation reaction. Okay? In other words, monomers are joined together using covalent bonds, which are strong shared associations between their electrons. They are joined together using these strong covalent bonds, and water is produced as a byproduct. Okay, we call this a condensation reaction because if you think about the water cycle and you think about condensation occurring, condensation is when water appears out of thin air, right? It seems like it. The water vapor in the air condenses into liquid water. In other words, it cools enough so that its molecular structure changes to liquid, and it condenses on the sides of windows as, droplets of water, or as dew on the grass or something like that. So water comes out of something. That's why we call it a condensation reaction. Another name for this is yes. Thank you. It took me a second to just think about this. Another name for it is the dehydration reaction. Okay, so it is the condensation reaction or the dehydration reaction. These are not opposites to each other, okay? Because we are removing water from the molecule, we are dehydrating it. Okay, so those two terms, even though they might seem contradictory, condensation and dehydration mean the same thing. We are removing a water molecule in the process of covalently bonding monomers, which are small molecules, into a large macromolecule, which we can also call a polymer. Okay, so here we can see all these different monomers, these little Lego pieces. Okay, and we bind them to, and actually they look more like beads. So all of these beads, however you want to perceive it, and we're going to bind all those beads onto this string and remove water as we do so. It's a condensation reaction, and that is what we use for anabolic reactions. For catabolic reactions, yay, cat, we are going to break down molecules into simpler forms. Okay, so this means that we are going to take a macromolecule and we are going to go ahead and break it down back into its monomers. Okay, this breakdown involves the opposite of a condensation/dehydration reaction, and this reaction is known as hydrolysis. Hydro, water, lysis, to break. Okay, so we have hydrolysis breaking this up with water. And it makes sense, right? If we removed water to join them together, if we add water back in, we break the molecule down. Okay, so hydrolysis. This is partially why water is so critical to the functioning of you and me and every organism, because water is essential for providing these anabolic and catabolic reactions to break down and build up your bodies. Okay? When I talked about us taking in materials from the environment and assimilating them into our bodies, this is what's happening. When we take in materials from the environment, we take in mostly polymers or macromolecules, and we have to deconstruct them. We have to break them down using hydrolysis into their small monomer pieces. And then we have to combine those monomers in a new way, whatever thing we need to build, right, in our bodies. We need to combine them into that particular structure and then join them together using a dehydration or condensation reaction so that we now have the molecule we need for our bodies. This is constantly occurring. Anabolism, catabolism, and back and forth, and back and forth. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on now that we have a firm grasp of those concepts. When we talk about living organisms, we are talking about organisms that are made out of organic compounds. A compound is two or more molecules joined together in some kind of bond, okay? And when we talk about organic, okay, I'm not talking about, they're free-range chickens, or, they were grown without herbicides or pesticides or whatever. No, or they're not genetically modified. I'm talking about, when I talk about organic, I'm talking about a particular formation or design or configuration of molecule that makes up a living being, okay? And now this is really interesting. You are made out of many of the same atoms and molecules that make up the table or chair or whatever else around you, okay? Unless the chair's made out of metal. But, if the chair's made out of wood or, if you're, various different, whatever, they're all the molecules that are around you in the room that are part of the inorganic, non-living things in your world are the same types of atoms that are within your body. So why is it that they are desks and chairs and computers and rocks and bricks and whatever? Why is it that they are all these inanimate objects and you are animate, you are organic? Okay, the reason is that though you are made out of the same types of atoms, those atoms are configured, they're put together in a different way. And the configuration of those atoms determines how they behave, okay? And whether or not they behave as a desk or whether or not they behave as a you. They behave differently based off their configuration. Okay, so when we talk about an organic configuration of a molecule, we are not talking about the same thing as when we would take the same atoms and put them into an inorganic formation, because they will behave differently. Okay, so organic compounds are often in the life that exists on the Earth anyway, carbon based, which means that at their center, at their heart, the thing that keeps them all together in the configuration that makes them something that can build life is the atom carbon. Okay, very few exceptions to this. All right, so there are some carbonates and oxides of carbons, but for the most part, any organic molecule is going to have carbon at its base. Carbon is very good at forming multiple covalent bonds. A covalent bond is great because it is the strongest type of bond that we could use. And that strength allows it to build these complex structures that allow for life to happen. Okay, that allow these molecules to behave as living things. Okay, so it allows for a wide variety of connections. When we look at the carbon atom, it allows for 4 possible covalent bonds to all the ones around it. Okay, it has 6 electrons. Okay, 2 in the first shell. All right, and then if we which is its inner shell, this we look over here. Okay, and then it has 4 in the next shell. And if you guys remember, in order for an atom to feel perfectly at ease or in a good place energetically, it has to have a full valence shell, which means its outermost electron shell. Okay, carbon fills up its first shell with 2, but the next shell can take 8. It only has 4 left, so it distributes them, and it has 4 remaining open slots. In other words, it can accept 4 potential electrons, meaning that it can bind with 4 potential atoms. Okay, so this is why carbon is at the center of life on Earth. And this is why in every science fiction, when, an alien visits the Earth, they go, "I believe we have found some form of carbon-based life." Okay, now it would be possible, and this is cool to think about, it would be possible in other planets for life to be based off of something other than carbon. Silicon has been one of the things that has been suggested, and we actually do have organisms that incorporate a lot of silicon into their bodies already on Earth. They're called diatoms. Look them up because they are so freaking cool. You can spend hours looking at diatoms online. So amazing. DIATOMS. Okay, let's move on. So, what are the types of organic compounds? There are 4 main classes that we're going to look for in living things. Does this mean they're the only classes? Absolutely not. But these are the 4 main ones that we can use to sort of group and identify various different molecular things. Okay, so we have carbs, which are sugars. We're all very acquainted with carbs, or at least I am very acquainted with carbs. I am super acquainted with carbs, and with the next one, which is lipids, which are fats and oils. Oh my god, I am acquainted with lipids. Whoa! Okay, yeah. But so carbs and lipids, sugars and fats and oils. And then we have proteins, okay, which are again going to be those enzymes, and not just the stuff found in meat, but also the stuff that makes up a lot of you, and nucleic acids. Okay, so carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. If you want to succeed in anything in biology, you need to have these 4 guys burned into your brain, okay? Because this is what it all constantly comes back to. Okay, all of these organic compounds we refer to as macromolecules. Okay, so when we talk about a carbohydrate, we are talking about a macromolecule that is either built out of carbohydrate monomers or is itself a carbohydrate monomer. Okay, so we are talking about either the small Lego pieces or the Lego structure that makes up carbohydrates. Okay, so each one of these, a carbohydrate, a lipid, a protein, a nucleic acid, each one of these is a macromolecule that's made up out of different monomers. Okay, so remember that carbohydrate is the big Lego castle or structure, and its monomer is all the little Lego pieces that make it up. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm driving that relationship home, that the monomer makes up a macromolecule. And these are the 4 classes of macromolecules. I know I'm saying that a million times. It's super important to understand. So the Lego pieces that make up a carbohydrate are known as monosaccharides. Examples of these would be glucose or fructose, which are common sugars that we see in fruit and in sucrose, which is actually it's a terrible example because it's disaccharide. So forget I said that. Basically, these are the small molecules that make up large carbohydrates. monosaccharides. Mono means one, saccharide means sugar. Okay, if you know about saccharin, it's a sugar substitute. It's named saccharin because it's coming from the Greek or Latin or whatever for sugar. Okay, so mono, one, saccharide, sugar. Lipid. A triglyceride is usually the form of lipid we'll see, and we'll look at that a little bit later, but a lipid is going to be made out of two types of monomers, a fatty acid and a monoglyceride. Okay, the monoglyceride is going to be what we call the head of the molecule, and the fatty acids are going to be the tails. Okay, if you want to remember this, a good way to remember that the fatty acids are going to be the tails coming off the monoglyceride head is that fatty acids sounds like something else. Just remove the D, and then you can think, ah, fatty acids, tail, makes sense. Okay, let's move on. So proteins are made out of amino acids, and nucleic acids are made out of nucleotides. I cannot drive home how important it is to memorize all four of these. Get them down in your mind, because that is not going to be just important for this year. It's going to be important, really important for next year. So definitely keep that in your brains. So let's take a look. So carbohydrate, monomers and monosaccharide. Example, glucose, ribose. Okay, both of these you can see as a ring structure. And you might be saying, I've never seen a ring that looks like that, Mr. Garner. I know, you may not have. But rings in biology just mean that they make an enclosed structure. Okay, so they're not going to be round or anything like that, not normally. They're usually going to be angular, but they're going to make a enclosed structure. We can see here that these two rings have different configurations. One is a pentose sugar because it has 5 carbons, and it makes a pentagram, right? That's what it's called. What's it? No, pentagon. Yeah, thank you. And then over here we have a 6-sided ring over here, and that is going to be our glucose. So you can have any different various ring shapes or structures. And obviously these are going to be bound together because they're monomers to make a larger unit, which is obviously a carbohydrate. Lipids are going to be made, lipids, well, it says they don't have monomers, okay, but they do have these subunits, and those subunits are going to be fatty acids. You can think of them as monomers, and usually people will ask you, what is a lipid monomer? So it's interesting they say that here. It's probably just a technicality of the name, but you can think of these as monomers. They are subunits, fatty acids, and this right here is an example. We can see it's a large carbon chain with a bunch of hydrogens coming off and a couple of oxygens. Okay, so fatty acid, long chain of carbons and hydrogens. Then we have proteins, and this right here is an amino acid. Okay, so actually, hang on, I want to go back here really quick. This is the head. This is the glycerol head, by the way, and this is the fatty acid tail. Okay, so this is what I was pointing out earlier with the lipid. Sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion. This is the glycerol head, and this is the fatty acid tail. Okay, normally there would be 3 fatty acid tails, which would be a triglyceride, which is I think what was throwing me off because I was expecting to see that since they mentioned it earlier. But anyway, so carbohydrates, monosaccharides such as glucose or ribose make up a carbohydrate. Lipids, fatty acids, and a glycerol head. Okay, fatty acid tail. Proteins, monomers, amino acid, there are 20 different ones that exist, and they all share this structure, a central carbon with a variable R group. R is just a stand-in letter. It just means enter whatever group here. Okay, so there are 20 different groups. That's what makes up the 20 different amino acids, but everything else is the same. They have an amine group over here and a carboxyl group over here, and it will always be the same, okay, except for the R group. The R group is the only thing that distinguishes between amino acids, and amino acids bind together into a protein. Nucleic acids are, their monomer is a nucleotide. Their RNA and DNA, they have slight differences, okay, but they're all going to be made out of this right here, which is a nucleotide, which has a phosphate group, a pentose sugar, and some form of nitrogenous base. Okay, so polymerization is, and I promise we're almost done, polymerization is the process by which we take a small monomer, or a bunch of small monomers, and we build them up into that giant, oh my god, my brain, macromolecule. Okay, so this is the anabolic reaction that's going to take those monomers and build them up into a macromolecule, okay? And we call it polymerization because if we take a bunch of monomers, which means one unit, and we put them together into a large unit made of many monomers, the prefix for many is poly, so polymer, okay, is what we end up with. That's what we can also call macromolecule is a polymer. Okay, so we take a bunch of monomers and build them up into polymers. So we have a class of carbohydrate, its monomer is a monosaccharide, its polymer is a polysaccharide, which makes sense, right? Okay, and the bond involved, this is a, okay, now I don't want you to be confused. This is a condensation or dehydration reaction. Okay, it has to be because it's an anabolic reaction. It's building up something. So this is a condensation or dehydration reaction, but in the case of sugars, it has a specific name called a glycosidic link. Okay, now that is really important to understand. It is just a condensation reaction that happens in sugars, but because it happens in sugars, we call it a glycosidic link. Okay, it's where we take monosaccharides and we build a polysaccharide out of them. Okay, in the lipid class, we take a glycerol and fatty acids and we turn them into a triglyceride, which is a glycerol head with 3 fatty acid tails. We call this an ester linkage when we link them together. Again, condensation reaction, anabolism. With proteins, we take amino acids and we build them into a long string of amino acids called a polypeptide, and we join each one of those amino acids together using a peptide bond. Okay, and nucleic acid, nucleotide, DNA or RNA, we call this a phosphodiester bond. It is between the sugar of one of the nucleotides and the phosphate group of another. Okay, so again, all of these are condensation / dehydration reactions that occur to build up these small monomers into their polymer forms. Okay, and their polymer forms are the forms that behave together to create a living thing. All right, so for examples, we have polysaccharides, starch, and glycogen. This is in the carbohydrate section. For triglyceride, this is what it looks like, 3 fatty acid tails onto 1 glycerol head. Okay, it says it's not actually a polymer. I'll look into this a little bit further. I'm not really sure why they're saying this. Polypeptides, we have a fibrous protein, 3-dimensional shape, does some job, and nucleic acids like DNA, double helix. Okay? Now, historically, this is the last thing, okay? Historically, it was believed that everything in the world possessed a vital force, okay? And specifically every living thing. And this spark of life, this vitae, this ember, whatever, soul that you want to call it in life, was what separated living things from non-living things. It was called vitalism, and it said that even though we might be made out of the similar stuff of the world, the thing that differentiated us was this special spark in life. And when we first discovered that you could take non-living molecules and turn them into a compound that could become part of a living thing, we were able to reject vitalism by showing that we could artificially synthesize an organic compound. Okay, and so basically this was the first inkling of the later philosophical inquiries that would come about to say, hey, you know what, actually, if we really take a look at this, it seems like all life comes out of non-life. Okay, and that would be huge for philosophy and biology going into the future. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's been a little bit long-winded. I know I drove some points home again and again and again, but this is the stuff, the key stuff I really want us to come back to and understand as we go into next year. I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I really, really look forward to being able to talk to you again on Thursday. All right, guys, have a great week.